Long ago and far away, or maybe not that long ago or far away, there was a village that loved Christmas. It was a small village located in an agricultural region. Most of the people who lived in the village and in the surrounding area were one way or another involved with farming or some other aspect of agriculture. And they all loved Christmas. There was just one church, one congregation, one church building in the village, and everybody was a member of that church. Not that everybody came to church every Sunday, but it was pretty much the same people, but the church was filled to overflowing every Christmas Eve, because everybody came to church on Christmas Eve. They had a church that was decorated with greens and poinsettias and wreaths, and, well, very much like this. Sometimes they would have a reception after the Christmas Eve service, nothing fancy, just cookies and punch. Other times they didn't do that. But it didn't matter, because the Christmas Eve service was the highlight of the year for these people in this village. One year, that Christmas Eve service was particularly exceptional. Tears in the eyes, people were moved by the hymns. The pastor gave a better than usual sermon. Everyone left that Christmas Eve feeling filled with the spirit of Christmas and very, very grateful that the Lord Jesus Christ had been born in Bethlehem some time ago. So inspiring was this Christmas Eve service that year that the mayor, who was like everyone else in the village, a very devout and pious person who loved Christmas, he had called for a meeting of the town council, and at this meeting he had a proposal to make, a new idea that next year, in addition to the Christmas Eve service in the church, they would have a Christmas Day feast in the town hall. And everyone would be involved in the planning and implementation for this feast. But the most crucial element of his plan was that for the next year, the people of the village would pray that the Lord Jesus Christ come to their feast on Christmas Day. Well, the members of the town council thought this was just a wonderful idea, and they immediately began organizing for the event, appointing committees. There was a committee for decorations, and a committee for music, a committee for food, but most important was a committee for prayer. A committee whose job it was to organize the individual and corporate prayer of the village, so that everyone was on the same page, so to speak, in praying that the Lord Jesus Christ would come to the feast on Christmas Day next year. The food committee obviously had the biggest task of all, to organize the food and how it would be prepared and served. And they decided that everything, all the meat and the vegetables, the fruit and the wine and everything else, would be the products of the people who lived there, product of what they had grown themselves. And they wanted the feast to include dishes that were representative of the crops in that region. And sure, there was difficulty because the harvest for some of those crops occurred in the summer, in the spring, in the fall, not in December. So it was decided that they would set aside portions of these seasonal crops to can and preserve so they could be enjoyed at the Christmas Day feast. Everyone was filled with enthusiasm and excitement as this idea spread and took hold in the village. People would meet each other on the street And isn't it wonderful that we're going to have this feast on Christmas? But then the conversation usually shifted to, really think the Lord Jesus Christ is going to come to our feast? Well, we'll see. The year went by more quickly than people thought it would. And lo and behold, it was Christmas Eve. And all the preparations for the feast the next day were accomplished. People went to church as they always did on Christmas Eve. And even though last Christmas Eve was special, this was even more special. In anticipation of the feast the next day, and the presence of the Lord Jesus Christ with them at that feast. Everyone left with hearts filled with joy and went to their homes. Most people couldn't sleep that night. It wasn't like the children anticipating the presents they would receive the next day. No, adult and children alike, so excited about the feast they couldn't sleep. In the morning, people skipped breakfast and skipped opening gifts in order to go by the town hall to make sure that the area of preparation that they had worked on had been accomplished as perfectly as possible. In the mid-afternoon, the town hall was fully decorated. People had offered their china and crystal and silver to be used on the tables at the feast, and all that was laid out just so. Some of the food was there and ready. Others started arriving with the people as they rode up in front of the town hall on their horses or in their carriages or in their wagons, and carrying food fresh from their ovens into the town hall. The people came a few at a time and gradually increased until everyone was inside the town hall, ready for the feast to begin. There was a head table. In the center of the head table was a seat of honor for the Lord Jesus Christ. And on one side was the mayor and his wife, and on the other side was the pastor and his wife. And everybody else was spread out at tables throughout the hall. The time came for the feast to begin, and people looked at their watches and looked around and looked at the head table and looked at the door, and, well, maybe he's late. The feast began anyway. Conversation over the food dwelled mainly on the preparations. And people were praising one another. Indeed, everyone was being praised because everyone had taken a hand in preparing the food and the decorations. The musicians were flawless, filled with all kinds of enthusiasm for their music. But still, amidst all the praise and compliments and the enjoyment of the event, people were stealing glances at the door. About halfway through the feast, the mood shifted as people began to doubt that the Lord Jesus Christ would indeed come to the feast. Just conversation just slowed down, quieter and quieter. The musicians lost the spark that they had at the beginning. And the high level of enthusiasm just kind of faded. Until people, near the end of the meal, accepted the fact that the Lord Jesus Christ was not going to come to the feast. People cleaned up, put things away, returned things to their rightful owner. Some were quite clear in voicing their disappointment that the Lord Jesus Christ had not come to the feast. And others, as people are prone to do, tried to put a happy face on the whole situation and say, well, just think about how wonderful the feast was. And wasn't it wonderful that we did this? And didn't we have a good time? But everybody did. They were just trying to avoid dealing with their own disappointment. No one was more disappointed than the mayor. After all, it is his idea. He went home sad and decided he would pray to God for God to give him an answer to the question, why did the Lord Jesus Christ not come to the feast? The mayor was in anguish to the point of tears. And finally, around midnight, God gave the mayor a vision of what had happened earlier in the day. The mayor, of course, had been inside the town hall, but this vision was at the outside of the town hall, focused on the door to the town hall. And the mayor in this vision saw the people arriving, some of them carrying food fresh from the oven, entering the town hall with the doorkeeper helping everyone in, welcoming everyone, holding the door open, ushering them inside. And the mayor smiled because everyone was dressed in their finest clothes, and everybody was so happy. Time passed, and everyone, apparently, in this vision, was inside the town hall, except for the doorkeeper who stayed outside, just in case a person came late, but most importantly, to welcome the Lord Jesus Christ if he was running late. Nothing happened in this vision for a while. And then the mayor saw a figure of a man coming down the road. He walked with a limp. Perhaps he was injured or handicapped in one way or another. Perhaps a wound. As the stranger got closer, the mayor was able to see that the stranger was very poorly dressed. His clothes were torn and dirty. His face and hands were dirty. He looked very disheveled. As he got closer, the mayor wondered who he was. The mayor knew almost everyone in that region. He did not recognize this man at all. When he got to the entrance to the town hall, he turned from the road and walked toward the door of the town hall. And the mayor in this vision saw the doorkeeper look up. And the mayor heard in this vision, the doorkeeper asked the stranger, "Who are you?" And the stranger responded in a language that the doorkeeper did not understand and that the mayor could not understand in his vision. The two, the doorkeeper and the stranger, tried several times to communicate, but without success. And then the doorkeeper, frustrated at the inability to communicate, pointed to the road and motioned for the stranger to get back on the road and continue his journey. At first, the mayor, on seeing this in his vision, approved of the actions of the doorkeeper. This could be some hobo, some migrant, some immigrant, maybe some refugee from a war somewhere. Maybe a homeless person, maybe an addict, a drunkard. Yeah, the doorkeeper did the right thing. This was not the right person to come for Jesus. And then the mayor realized in his vision that the Lord Jesus Christ had come to their feast. And they had turned him away because he was not whom they were expecting. And the mayor thought about that. And while he was very upset that the stranger had been turned away, he realized the people of the village had not done anything new. Because when Jesus was born in Bethlehem in the stable, no one knew about it. No one. I mean, think about it. 2 country bumpkins, Mary and Joseph, in Bethlehem only because they had to be part of the census that was taken for the purposes of taxation. They didn't know the ways of the town. They didn't know that they needed to make a reservation at the inn, or that they had to make arrangements with friends or family for a place to stay. They get to town. She's pregnant. They're not married. And she's so pregnant that she's about to give birth. And so they do the best they can. They find a stable to take shelter, in which to take shelter for the night, and then it's time for the baby to be born. So they take the newborn baby, place it in the trough that holds feed for the animals in the stable, wrap him in bands of cloth. Just the 3 of them and the animals there in the stable, the most important birth in human history. Nobody knows about it except some shepherds. Go figure. Some shepherds? Shepherds were the dregs of society. If you could get a better job, you took it. You didn't pick a job as a shepherd. Most of the shepherds were thieves, outcasts, rough people who lived in the fields, sit around telling stories and gossiping about other people and insulting one another, sharing their food, yes, but their main job was to make sure that the sheep were safe. How did they find out about the birth of the Messiah? Because angels came and told them that they would find the Messiah, the Christ, in a manger in a stable, wrapped in bands of cloth. The angels sang in the sky, "Glory to God in the highest, and peace on earth to those with good will." So after the angels left, the shepherds decided that they needed to go check this out. If the Messiah was born in Bethlehem, and they were right there, they needed to go see that Messiah themselves. So they did. They went into town and miraculously found the right stable that had the manger, that had the baby in the manger wrapped in bands of cloth. And they went in and they worshiped him. And then they left and went back to the fields and talked about this among themselves. And they started telling other people about it too. But still, on the day that the baby Jesus was born, no one knew about it but Mary and Joseph from out of town, and the shepherds from out in the fields. No kings, no queens, no princes, no princesses, no priests or Levites or religious leaders or scribes or Pharisees or anyone else like that came to greet God's Messiah. No presidential candidates somebody. Instead, just some shepherds. And then the mayor thought, when Jesus grew up and started traveling around, preaching and teaching and healing, the people he went to were those like the shepherds, the people who lived like Mary and Joseph, the people who lived on the margins of society, not the rich and the powerful, not the pretentious folk, but the poor, the crippled, the people in need of healing, the people in need of, most in need of God's love. And this so upset those who had power and position, especially the religious authorities, that they saw Jesus as a threat. The kind of love that Jesus was talking about and showing was dangerous. The love of God is dangerous. And so the religious leaders conspired with the political leaders to have this threat put to death. The people of the village, the mayor thought, had been working for a year to prepare for this feast, but the Hebrew people had been preparing for centuries for the Messiah to be born. And then, when the Messiah was born, they killed him. The next day, the mayor called a meeting of the town council and told them about his vision and about his thoughts. And one of the members of the council commented that they had become so wrapped up in the preparations for the feast, although well-intentioned, they lost sight of what Christmas is really about. They lost sight about why the Christ child was born in the first place. And someone else commented, we were treating Jesus as a celebrity. And he'd come to our feast and not somebody else's feast. Yeah, we're better than everybody else. He's taking our feast. After much discussion, the town council decided that next Christmas they would have another feast with a few important changes. Instead of a head table, there would just be regular tables for everyone, but at every table there would be one empty chair for whoever might attend. And the doorkeeper would be instructed to turn no one away. What instructions have you given to the doorkeeper of your heart about who will be admitted to the Christmas feast? See, this is our Christmas feast right here. We're here in this season of Christmas to celebrate the birth of the Messiah roughly 2,000 years ago. We celebrate with word and song that miraculous event. But then we also take into ourselves the body and the blood sacramentally represented with the bread and the wine. We receive Jesus into ourselves as spiritual nourishment. We don't just celebrate. We make Jesus, the presence of Jesus, part of us. And then we go out from here and we carry Jesus with us. And we know that in our lives, whether in our family family, our work, our day-to-day activities at the grocery store or wherever, we're going to encounter people who are the Lord Jesus Christ for us. Because they are people who, like us, are very much in need of that radical love of God. And so, we not only receive Jesus, we take Jesus with us and give Jesus through our own words and actions. We give the love of Jesus to those who most need it, and we turn no one away. Amen.